Hey guys, and welcome back to episode 35 of Dark Souls 3 with Chris. Yeah, we're still doing the story, so if you're not interested in that, you can just mute this and just go do something else. Keep raking in those view minutes, and if you are interested, we're going to be talking about some really neat stuff today. I decided I'm going to mention the countries, or the nations, or realms, or whatever you want to call them, that are mentioned in Dark Souls 1 and 2 and 3. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about 3 in this, because again, I haven't really gotten a good grasp on the plot of Dark Souls 3 yet. I guess if I'm going to replay it later on, which I will try to do as much as I can, because I'm almost positive I've missed some NPCs and stuff. And speaking of NPCs, that's one of the things that's very, very different. Oh, well, good work, Chris. Excellent work, as always. Well done, well done. That was how many souls? 20,000, probably? I don't know. You lost them. That's the funny part. Anyway, I mentioned in the previous episode Astora, but I said Astoria. I don't know what I did that, but Astora is the country that Oscar came from. It is also the home nation of Solaire, and surprisingly, Blacksmith Andre, the blacksmith of both the first and third game. Anastasia of Astora might not sound familiar, but she's actually the firekeeper in the... Yeah, you can try to brute force it, it's not gonna work. She's the firekeeper of the very first, of the Firelink Shrine in the first game. So, she's not super important, but she does play a role in the first game. You also have Undead Prince Rickard, which is... Seriously? Seriously? Alright, well, you got Undead Prince Rickard anyway, and that's one of the legendary, I'm using air quotes again, legendary undead you meet in Sen's Fortress. Not Sen's Dungeon, Sen's Fortress. And that's interesting, because Undead Prince Rickard, you can get his rapier from defeating him. He's one of those people who came all the way to Sen's Fortress. You know, I talked about that in the previous episode, but he clearly wasn't up to the task. He either lost his soul fighting the snake people, or got hit by the traps too many times, or most likely he couldn't get past the ginormous golem that's protecting the entryway to Anor Londo. Speaking of the giant undead golem, not golem, not that guy, we're talking about the golem, actually. The one guy who managed to beat him was Black Iron Tarkus. Now, Black Iron Tarkus, he's a badass. So badass that you can just summon him for that fight and he will deal with the fight. He will defeat the golem on his own. He don't need your help. That's Black Iron Tarkus for you. I'll get a little bit on detail with him later on. But Astora, I guess if you want to use a real-world equivalent to Astora, I think Arthurian British Isles would be appropriate. Maybe France. Maybe France would be appropriate, but, you know, Western... Seriously, guys, can you fucking stop dying for a second? It's like I'm actually talking while playing the game, considering how poorly I'm doing. But we'll be past this before you know it. But anyway, Astora is one of the major countries in the first game. And incidentally, in the third game, if you choose an Astoran appearance, they say that it's only a shadow of its former self. So some things happened between the first and third game that fucked up all of Astora. I'm going to look further into that later on, but that's interesting to note. We do meet someone from Astora in this game, and that would be Anri, the knight who wears the same armor, the Elite Knight armor, that is the armor of choice for the chosen undead of the first game. Like in all the concept art and all the, publicity art, all that stuff, that armor is Astoran, clearly. And that's the armor being worn by, ooh, nicely done there, Chris. That's the armor being worn by Anri, who is the person we met way, way, way back before we got to the swamp. Like when we came to the forest. I don't know if you guys remember. But we will meet her again in a few episodes. A little bit of a spoiler there. Anyway, then there's Baldur. Now, we don't really meet any NPCs from Baldur per se, but Baldur, if you recall, is the home country of the Baldur Swag Sword, the best game of Dark... wow, the best sword of Dark Souls 1. I'm not even kidding. I went through the entire game using the Balder Swag Sword, or the Balder Side Sword as it's called. The Balder Knights are, by the way, the first kind of really difficult undead you meet in the undead settlement. They're guarding the first bell tower, and they come with rapiers or with their side swords. They're the cool guys with the flowing capes that you can't get. Anyway, then we have Berenike, which is another country that we don't really meet any NPCs from, but there's two sort of things of notice here. There's the Black Iron Tarkus, who I talked about before. Badass, major badass. Unfortunately, not very good at navigating ceiling things. You know, the walkways? What would you call them? Anyway, he basically dies from falling. So that's the end of the legendary Black Iron Tarkus. You meet him by the giant painting in Anor Londo. Or you find his body there anyway. And the Tower Knights from the first game. And you know, when we were in the cathedral, we were fighting some fairly huge knights. I'm wearing one of their helmets right now, by the way. And they are sort of the Dark Souls 3 equivalent to the Tower Knights of the first game. The Tower Knights were these massive undead that were not super hard to kill, but they were definitely creepy, and they did not respawn. Interesting to note. After that, we got Karim, and Karim has kind of a bad reputation. And the reason for that would be Lautrec, Knight Lautrec of Karim, because he is a follower of the goddess... Oh, what was her name again? Well, basically, he's not a super nice guy. And he's like the face of Karim from the first game. We also have Oswald of Karim, whom I think is the priest of... the goddess of sin? I don't recall. But anyway, Lautrec basically kills Anastasia, the Firekeeper of the first game, and takes her soul with him. So you have to track him down and kill him to get her soul back. Long story short, he's a bit of a douche, and we're better off without him. He's got a damn cool armor, though. Karim seems to be kind of a... Well, they have an Earl of Karim, so it might not be a major country, it could even be a region of another country. Earl is kind of a minor title, if I recall. Not entirely sure where in the hierarchy it would be, but that does imply that Karim might not actually be a country, but more like a region of something. I'm guessing a store, but that might just be me. And then we have Katarina. All right, yeah, we've met some people from Karim. We met the blind woman. Yeah, Chris died again. Whoop-de-doo. We met the blind woman who can teach us miracles. She's a priestess. And we met Igon, the guy with the giant hammer, who's her guardian, sort of, I guess. Now, Katarina, they are the Onion Knights. And if you watched any of my Let's Plays before, or if you play Dark Souls, you will know the Onion Knights are the guys with the giant round helmets and the kind of chubby-looking armor. They're not necessarily chubby themselves, it's just that the armor is kind of looks like an onion, basically. And in the first game, we had Siegmeyer, who is actually pretty much of a major NPC, because... Wow. Well, at least the other guy fell down too. Good work, Chris. You lost another couple of thousand souls. Making steady progress here, clearly. Anyway, Siegmeyer, he is on his own quest. You could say that he's one of the chosen undead as well. I'd like to think that he makes it all the way to Anor Londo. So that means something, right? I mean, you help him out a couple of times, you ring the bells. I don't think he ever rang the bells himself, well, he wouldn't have, because he was sitting outside of the Sen's dungeon, Sen's Fortress. But he did make his way through Sen's Fortress, all the way through Anor Londo, and anyone who's played that part knows what a fucking pain in the ass it is. Bye. And basically, he's pretty much a cool guy. I think you can save him, I'm not entirely sure, but in my playthrough he died. By the end, at least. But his daughter, Sieglinde, is actually out looking for him. And you help her out of one of the crystal golems of Sieves. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And, well, in this game, we've met another one. We met Sigurd, who reminds me more of Siegmeyer than Sieglinde. And Sigurd helped us out with the fire demon, if you recall. Haven't met him since then, though. Then we got the Far East and Shiva, and I'll be honest, I never actually met Shiva, so I don't know anything about that guy. which is amazing. I mean, I've played through Dark Souls 1 at least 3 times, and I've never actually went out of the way to talk to Shiva. Because he's not a necessary NPC, and he's kind of the leader of a covenant in the forest. It's complicated, but he's from the Far East, quotation mark, meaning that he's apparently Asian. Possibly, I mean, considering his name, he might be Indian. Shiva being a god of India, of Hindi mythology. No, Hindi religion, sorry. Then we got the Great Swamp. And what marks the Great Swamp is that they are all pyromancers. That's where pyromancy didn't come from, because pyromancy came from the Witch of Isolith. But it is believed that one of the daughters of the Witch of Isolith, who wasn't consumed by the Bed of Chaos and turned into a demon, actually taught pyromancy, the art, the magic of fire, to the people of the swamp. And in the first game, the person you meet from the Great Swamp is Laurentius. He is a guy you saved from being eaten, and in return he teaches you pyromancy. It's pretty simple. I think he actually, if you tell him that I think you meet the daughter of the Witch of Isolith in the swamp, and if you tell him, not the swamp, not the Great Swamp, but another swamp, and if you tell him that she's there, he will run to try to find her, and he will hollow, unfortunately, so you'll have to kill him. In this game, we met Cornix. We saved him from a cage, and we've been giving him books. But since I don't believe in pyromancy, we haven't really done any of that stuff. Then we have Ulasil. I know there's a lot of information here, but you can find this online if you want to. Ulasil is pretty special because it is the setting for the DLC of Dark Souls 1. Artorias of the Abyss. Artorias of the Abyss, that's the name. Ulasil actually doesn't exist anymore in the present timeline in Dark Souls 1. Instead, you get pulled back into the past to go there, and it turns out it's been entirely destroyed by Manus, or Manus, I think his name is. Manus, some believe, is actually the furtive pygmy corrupted by basically consuming too much humanity. Because you find him in the Abyss, which is also where you will find a shit ton of humanity just floating around. And Artorias, one of the 4 Knights of Gwyn, is actually there, and he has been corrupted by the Abyss, so you have to kill him. And incidentally, his pet wolf, Sif, guards his grave in the present timeline. It's all very complicated. We'll talk about the 4 Knights in another episode, because I don't think I have time to cover those. But they're another interesting piece of lore for this game series. But basically, you go to Ulasil and you fight Manus because he's threatening to unravel and cover everything in darkness. So that's Ulasil, and the one NPC we meet from there is Princess Dusk, who incidentally also exists in the present timeline because she's been captured by one of the crystal golems of Seath. That guy's always capturing maidens. And then we have Thorolund. Man, we are almost done with all these countries. Thorolund is actually one of the more interesting places because it is the home country of the White Circle faith, I think it's called. It's the very first covenant you can use. Sorry, I have a problem where I lose words. Chris, don't. No. You're gonna. Oh, yeah, you died again. See, this is why we're not paying too much attention to the gameplay, because Chris is just dying, and it's kind of painful to watch. But I promise you, the next episode will be different. But basically, Thorolund is where Allfather Lloyd formed his religion. And Allfather Lloyd is a character you never actually meet or even see in Dark Souls 1. But he's a very important NPC. NPC, of course, stands for non-player character. Should have mentioned that before. Basically, any character in the game that's not you. So, Allfather Lloyd formed his church, which is, I think, something with the White Circle. And they are actually focusing on kindling the bonfires. So their entire belief is sort of circling around the need for the first flame and to get rid of the curse of the undead. So they were the ones I mentioned, one of the followers of Gwyn, or one of the loyal groups who are trying to keep the Age of Fire going on. And you meet a few characters from there. You meet Petrus of Thorland, which is actually one of the very first NPCs you meet in Dark Souls 1. He's the guy with the very ugly bob cut. He is a cleric of Thorland, and he's there on a quest together with Rhea and Vince and Nico. And the whole story around them it's complicated, but it's not super interesting. But essentially, Petrus turns out to be a coward, and he abandons them to Hollow in the catacombs beneath where Nito has his place. But another two very interesting NPCs. The first one being Paladin Leroy, probably named after Leroy Jenkins, but you never know. Leroy the Paladin was the very first undead to venture to Lordran to try to restore the first flame, to try to prove himself as a chosen undead. And he's an NPC you can fight and summon as well, I believe. Alright, that guy just roll off to the middle of nowhere. I don't actually think we get any XP for that guy, but I'm gonna have to keep my eyes on that. The second NPC is my favorite, is Havel the Rock. So Havel the Rock is allegedly from Thorland. I don't think it's been proven. I took this of the Dark Souls 1 Wikia. I think it was a Wiki anyway. And I don't recall ever reading that Havel was necessarily from Thorland. He was a cleric, presumably then of the White Circle, which would mean that he would maybe be from Thorland. But he was also a close friend of King Gwyn. I mean, Lord Gwyn, Lord of Sunlight. But I think he led a rebellion against him. I'm not entirely sure. So that's Thorland. And then Vinheim. Vinheim, where the School of the Dragon, or the Dragon Magic School, or whatever you want to call it is. Vinheim is where people studied magic. And we're not talking miracles here, we're talking straight up magic. So both me and Havel, we don't like Vinheim. That's just how it goes. One of the most famous people from Vinheim is Big Hat Logan, and just like his name implies, he's got a huge hat. Big Hat Logan is probably the most prominent and successful and skilled wizards of all of Vinheim. Well then, that guy just went off the cliff. And we actually meet him in Dark Souls 1. Now, Big Hat Logan is obsessed with finding the library of Seath the Scaleless, because Seath the Scaleless is a dragon, and is the founder, probably, of the Vinheim Schools of Magic. And you can be from Vinheim too. And there's another NPC in this game called Orbeck that we haven't actually found. I forgot to pick him up, because in my other playthrough, which is always behind this one, I actually did find the guy, and he's the one who teaches you magic in the game. Orbeck of Vinheim. I don't know anything about him other than his name. So, that's that. So that would be Vinheim. Then there's Xena, and there's really only one guy from there. He's Domhnall of Xena. He's a merchant. He sells you gear from bosses you defeated. There's really not much else to know about him. He's got wacky, weird armor. And that would be all, pretty much all the countries, at least in Dark Souls 1. I might have missed one or two, but honestly, these are the only important ones. And even then, I've covered some not very important ones. And these countries are mostly prominent because there's NPCs from them, there's some items from them, and you can also have appearance based on them. And interestingly, Katharina, I think if you look at the skin... Oh no, don't die, Chris. Don't die. Please don't die. If you look at the skin of Siegmeyer, he's not actually dark-skinned, but the basic skin of Katarina is dark-skinned, so that's interesting. It could be a multicultural kind of place. Who knows? It could be just everyone's dark-skinned there. That could be normal, and Siegmeyer is just one of the exceptions. Sieglinde as well is not. So, what's up with that? Then again, you were never actually meant to see their faces. I've just played once with a helmetless mod, and it's kind of interesting. But wherever you're from in this game, that has no impact on your story. Like, there's not like if you're from Astora, someone be like, oh, you're from Astora, da da da. No, it has nothing to do with the story. So it's just kind of a cosmetic thing. But it's interesting because if you look at, for example, Solaire of Astora, and if you look at Oscar of Astora, they're extremely different. Solaire has this kind of shitty, semi-built together from all kinds of stuff, armor. I mean, not shitty, I love the guy. But he's very different from Oscar of Astora, who has the Elite Knight set. So maybe that means that Solaire is not actually a knight. He just went there on his own quest. He's kind of like Don Quixote, you know. He praises the sun, and he's here to bring the sun back. And, I mean, Gwyn is the Lord of Sunlight, so maybe he's, you know, he believes in Lord Gwyn. Incidentally, I forgot to mention this. When you meet Gwyn, when you fight him, he is no longer the Lord of Sunlight. He is the Lord of Cinders. And where have we heard that name before? Well, I'm gonna leave you with that, and I'll see you in the next episode of Dark Souls 3. Until then, bye-bye.